friends, and welcome to another episode of Booked, a place to explore the realms of creativity. This week's guest is T.A. Shelano, author of The Doctor's Hidden Patients. Thank you so much for joining me today. Welcome.
Thank you.
Great.
Sorry.
Just abrupt. It's fine. It's good. This has been great. We've been recording all my morning and your evening. So we did an episode of the Middle Age Podcast, which is your podcast, and then we did an episode with Rage and Rich, and now it's your solo one. But the order's going to be different, so I'm here to Pulp Fiction everybody and give them like the wrong order of everything. So it's been a funny old day, hasn't it?
It has. So I do apologise for the confusion, but thank you for the third recording that we're now doing together. So yeah, thank you very much for having me on Booked.
Oh, you're welcome. It's honestly such a pleasure. So you and I connected on Twitter. Again, I'm going to call it Twitter until the day I die. And I remember you reaching out at some point. I can't remember where it came from. And you were like, oh, if you're interested, why don't you read the first chapter of my book? And I thought, okay, that's a bit forward, but I like the sound of it. So you have the first, how many chapters on your website to read? Is that still there?
Yeah, the first 3 chapters are sort of within the blog on my website, shelanobooks.co.uk.
Excellent. You're so good at plugging things. It's natural now. But yeah, so you sent me the link and I read the first chapter and I was like, hang on a minute, this is interesting. Okay, so we've got a crazy doctor. That's what I thought was happening. I was like, mad scientist, experiments. It really reminded me of Aliens. There's the moment where Sigourney Weaver's character is walking through the lab and there's all those different versions of like her mashed up with the xenomorphs. That's what I was thinking. And then in the back of my mind, I was like, okay, creepy sci-fi. And then you were releasing each chapter and I was reading them and I was like, this is developing into something very different. I was like, okay, the Doctor's Hidden Patients. And I was trying to work out for the life of me what it was going to be. And then when you finally released the book and I read it from cover to cover, I was pleasantly surprised at how it developed over time. And I'm not going to spoil it because I think it would sound better coming from you, but it turned from this like weird sci-fi thing that I thought it was going to be to this really playful, like classic British like crime thriller with a lot of comedy in it. And I really, really enjoyed it. So thank you so much for writing it, firstly.
Well, thank you for that. I really do appreciate that. I suppose it's interesting. A lot of people have taken different things from it that have spoken to me about it. In terms of writing it, I think I had the initial idea about having this sort of scientist doctor figure creating these half human, half robot hybrids secretly in the warehouse. But at the same time, I didn't really want to go down too much of a kind of a Frankenstein type route. So I was trying to find how that would be the initial hook concept for it. But then where do you take that story? And, where do you then bring in, other characters and underpin that, I guess. And the key thing for me was I decided very early on to obviously kill him off, really. And
very early on.
Very early on, which, I don't know whether that's the right or wrong way of doing it. But I thought, well, if you do that, what you create then is this mechanism for what will happen in terms of what he's been doing, what will be, the ramifications and the spin-off of that. And I think there was an element of that around, life can flip on a bit of a coin about how things go one way or the other and how things turn out. So there's an element of that, I think, in my thought process around, could I spin a story from there? So you kind of lead people have said, oh, I thought it was going to be much more of a sci-fi type thing, which it's not as much of really in the end. And that's kind of like a sort of minor element of it. But then, you've kind of then whirled into this other sort of world of characters that end up kind of connecting or crossing each other as a result of what this one man had been doing, who's no longer there, and including obviously the impact particularly on his children, who kind of become the innocent bystanders caught up in this mad, crazy mess that emerges really from his death and what he'd been doing. So that's where I kind of went with it. And the thing is, I know some people say they plot the book out from the beginning. And obviously, this was a first book, that I've written. So I didn't do that. So I didn't actually know what the ending was going to be.
Interesting.
Um, I kind of worked through it almost chapter at a time, and then literally sort of get into sort of like 30, 40,000 words in, then started to think much more about the ending. So
Mm,
I kind of just went with getting ideas on the page and spinning off that. So you get a little idea around, well, what about if that happened? What
mm,
about if they do that? And then you just then try and work the narrative from that and build it together.
mhm,
I think one of the inspirations probably for me in terms of how, I'm not obviously not going to give lots away, but in terms of that bringing the whole thing together towards
mhm.
the end and lots of characters being brought together was probably inspired a little bit by a British film called Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, which is probably one of my favourite films.
Mhm,
Which was Guy Ritchie, who people may
mhm,
remember was married to Madonna, and it was Jason Statham's very first breakout film, I think, as
mhm,
well. But that had that kind of a premise where
mhm,
a chain of events spin off that kind of end up bringing groups of people into
mhm,
contact with each other and in that sort of way. So I
mhm,
think there was an element of, because I like that, I thought, could I do something like that in the book? Obviously not
mm.
relevant to the specific, sorry, get my words out, specifically to
That's
the
okay.
film, but as in do it in that way. So
Mhm,
then the whole thing around the construct of the writing of it was around building this mechanism and
mhm,
how that you then can bring suddenly all of those things together whilst coming up with ideas as well that would give great plot twists that you hope people won't see come in.
mhm.
Bits interspersed with bits of humor as well, as you say. And also, I think a bit about capturing the era. So I
Yeah.
set it in 1999.
Mhm,
Kind of thought that was a bit of a balance for where we're at now, actually, in terms of that cusp of the millennium where you had this breakthrough of technology around
mhm,
mobile phones, the internet, and all of the rest of it has kind of exploded. That
mhm,
if you were having like a backward, forward look almost of how things have gone, so we're
mhm,
then interspersing that in with what was happening, in 1999 in terms of popular culture and some of those references, so that you can kind of put people back in that era.
I very much enjoyed it. I mean, I was born in '94, but I was kind of like cognizant around the sort of at the turn of the sort of 2000s. But yeah, it was genuinely very very enjoyable, and I had a lot of fun reading it because there are elements of I'm gonna try very hard not to spoil anything. There are lots of action scenes which I very much enjoy, and lots of sassy characters. Like there are a couple of characters where again I'm not going to say who they are because I don't want to spoil it because it's not a nice surprise when you're like, okay, so I'm getting to know you, character. We sass pants. But there's really really good banter between them, and you did a really good job of having that relationship between the brother and sister sort of bouncing off each other, and they have their very distinct personalities, and the way that they tackle certain challenges within the plot. Do you have any siblings? Like, is that something that you drew from your experience with them, or is it an observational thing?
I think it's probably I do, but I think it's much more of an observational thing actually
Mm,
around things. And again, you get older and you get more observant, maybe of people
mm-hmm,
and different things and relationship dynamics. So I was kind of interested in the element as well about people, how people's develop in their lives and different things, and how things can spin you in a different way.
mm,
And then how that with the brother and sister relationship of dealing with the grief element, obviously in terms of that this has happened
mm,
versus then the danger element they now find themselves in because of what their father had been doing.
mm-hmm,
I think that was an interesting dynamic to see how that would play out,
mm-hmm,
and just exploring some of those things and how different people deal with different situations. And yeah, it was an interesting journey. There's quite a lot of characters that people have sometimes said in it in parts, almost I don't know whether supporting characters or there's
mm-hmm,
different people at different points. But I thought, but that's to me is a more realistic way of life. Sometimes
mm-hmm,
if you focus wholly on one or two people is fine, but actually I
mm-hmm,
wanted to go into something where actually there are always in life there will always be the supporting characters that actually often play a quite critical part. Again, without going into spoilers, there's a bit certainly where a very minor supporting character
mm-hmm,
becomes providing a very important piece of the information.
Mhm.
And it's that's often how things do play out in life, that the way those sort of little moments and things that spin off in different ways. So I
Mm.
was really kind of interested in that, and I also wanted to do something that was, I think, fun to read.
It
you
was,
know
yeah.
it's that kind of um almost like I think somebody described it as escapism.
Mhm.
And you could literally sort of, I wanted that. I wanted to be quick, and that it wasn't something where you'd kind of be pondering, oh, what's going on here? This is drifting
Mhm.
a bit. It was I kept it quite turning, quite quick. And
Yeah.
yeah, I was really keen on definitely getting in the plot twists, but
Mhm.
without, I didn't want obvious ones. Do you know what I
Mhm.
mean? I just didn't want stuff to be, oh, I saw that coming.
Mhm.
Often some of the feedback has been where people go, I really like that. I didn't see that coming.
Mhm.
And I think then you feel like you've done a better job almost as an
Mhm.
author if people don't see or don't know what's going to happen next. And that
Yeah.
keeps people's interest. So that was a big driver for me in it.
Mhm. I think you've done what I really love about this book is that you've done grief justice, because there are moments where you forget actually that you're sad that somebody's left us or that something bad has happened, and then there are moments where it'll hit people at just random times, and all of a sudden they break down and they have a terrible time, and it's you've inserted that very well into the sort of structure of the book. I also liked the fact that because it was quite complex, you've got a huge cast of characters, you kept it pretty linear. There's not lots of like flitting back too much into things that have happened, and you'll give like somebody's perspective and then another person's perspective, and then they join up. And what I loved was the scene, I think it's in the town square or the town center, where kind of everybody meets in the middle. Which I was like, when is everybody going to get in the same room? And it was really good because I was like, oh, finally they're all seeing each other. But yeah, it was fascinating. I think there's a lot of secrets, a lot of lies, a lot of deception, and corruption as well. And you go into a lot of detail with the structure within the police, for example. Did you have to do a lot of research for this, or is it something where you've watched like a lot of The Bill?
Well, I have watched a lot of The Bill and a lot of detective drama series, which definitely helps the misspent
Mhm,
youth, certainly on certain things.
mhm,
But the research point, I did obviously do a lot of research while I was writing the book. But not only with things like that, but I tell you where it became really interesting. If you
mhm,
write something at a certain time,
mhm.
making sure it's accurate in terms of,
Yeah.
so again, without going into the finer details, but there are references to maybe particular phones that were
Mhm.
available at that time. So there was research even into when models of phones came out,
Oh wow.
when films came out, songs, different things, to make sure, again, you're
Mhm,
definitely representing that, and that people don't go, well, that's a load of rubbish because that didn't happen until 5 years later. So
mhm,
that was a big part of it for me, was trying to do that.
mhm,
And yeah, and definitely take influences from things that you've seen, and do your research and try and bring that side out into it, I think, definitely, and make it real. So I
mhm,
had very different characters.
mhm,
I think you probably would agree that there's no dynamic one type of person in it.
mhm,
I've got male characters, female characters, different ethnicity characters, ages, and all sorts. So it
mhm,
was interesting exploring that. I think I kind of went into the mode of society
mhm,
as well, and how different people interacting in circumstances and situations. And yeah, obviously I took a lot of artistic license with certain things, particularly around the robots, for example. So somebody had said to me at one point, yeah, there's certain things, the way I'm looking at it, 1999, and the way you're talking about certain things
mhm,
seems, but you've got to have a little bit. I think you're allowed that in a fiction point, as long as you try and keep things
mhm,
well researched into the time. And when I went through
mhm,
the editorial process of it, actually was really important, to me, that it was right. And I went to great efforts around some of that, um, to the degree of what when I started, I wasn't recording a lot of what I was doing, and then I realised I got so far in and went, hang on a second, how are you going to know what you've written in chapter 3 doesn't then completely contradict something later, or you do something with a character. So I ended up having a secondary document where I would actually start to work through each chapter of what was happening, the key things, the key points. So you've got a reference document then as you go through, especially when you're doing something over a period of time. So you go, okay, actually, that's fine because they said that they, or no, you can't do that because that won't work with that. That was an interesting challenge, especially around, like you say, where you're trying to cover up to what character said that lie there, or who's done that at that point, and how you. That was a huge challenge. And it was at times, it does get a bit complex at times. But again, you want that to then come out when somebody's reading it to go. And in fact, one of the feedback somebody did give me was to the effect of, I can't believe actually how you've managed to bring all of that together in that way. You know, the complexity, make it make sense in this way, and all the rest of it, and bring it. They said, I think that's, you know, one of the impressive things around it.
Because I mean, there are sometimes when you read books that have a lot of deception in them and a lot of characters that have different plots, and then how do they come together and why are they relevant? I really hate reading something or watching a film where I'm like, well, what happened to that loose end? Because are they leaving that as a cliffhanger, or you know, did they just forget, or what was the point of that character in the first place? But it seems like everybody has their place. They all play a part in the sort of finale and how it kind of ends up in the sort of final like 3-4 chapters. But yeah, it honestly it was a lot of fun, and I can tell by interviewing both you and Raging Rich that you're very good at banter anyway, so I feel like that translated across. That was it seems like it's very much your humor in the book.
It's interesting when you say that, because there are points where, and I know Rich said he read certain parts of it, and he said, I could go, that's my humor. So he saw that in it. And then there'd be other bits he said, I go, oh, you know, I quite like, I just like it. And I wouldn't think that I'd written that. You know, as in, that doesn't jump out. That was definitely me, where some of the humor things he thought actually did. And my own wife was the same. He was the very first person to actually read the first draft. And I remember her saying to me, oh, this isn't what I would have expected at all. And my favourite quote from her was, "Well, it's better than I thought it was going to be." So she obviously had quite low, limiting expectations of what I'd be able to achieve. I think there was a point where I even said to her, I did a lot of drafting during the COVID times, and you know, you'd be at home, you couldn't go out and do things, and she'd be sort of, you know, vacuuming and cleaning, and she'd look at me sat there at the front table, you know, working on that. I think there was times where she's looking at me going, are you really working on a book, or are you just trying to get out of housework? You know what I mean? There better genuinely be an end product here. And then when she read the first draft, she was a bit like, this is, you know, completely not what I was expecting. And again, she would say there are bits in it, oh yeah, I can sort of see that in your humour and stuff. But there are other bits where it's like, not at all. Which I think is also the skill to a degree. If you're going to, you know, write something, is that people don't necessarily pick up and go, oh, I can see you've written that. You know what I mean? As in, you take it in a way that you've developed as a writer as well as what you do with your own characters, but that your almost journey through writing that book, that you go through that kind of process of developing what you're doing, and exploring different ideas and thought processes, which I really did enjoy that. I mean, it was an unbelievable challenge, and one where for long periods of time you think you're never going to get to the end. But it's interesting that I was listening earlier on today to Graham Norton, obviously who you'll know, was being interviewed. Weirdly, somebody who's done a lot of interviewing was actually being interviewed by Ramesh Ranganathan on a radio show. And one of the things Ramesh asked him about was his book writing, because Graham's obviously been doing novels. And it was interesting what he said. It absolutely resonated. And again, we're on completely different, you know, scales of life. But Graham said, oh, you know, when he did the first one, he said, you know, somebody said, you know, how do you think it's going to go? And all this. And he went, oh, you know, I mean, I'm just hoping it's going to be good or something. And they went, oh, you're hoping it's going to be good? They said, you should just be glad that you've done it. So it is good in that sense that you've you've taken it from that to the end point. And I think sometimes we forget that actually in some respects it's a big challenge to write a book. It doesn't matter whether you're the best-selling author or you're not. To actually write a book from start to finish and make it make sense is not an easy thing, and it is a great achievement to reflect back on. I'd
Absolutely.
love Graham's book sales, obviously, but
Wouldn't we all?
who wouldn't? But I like it where you resonate even as somebody who's not a professional author or has a where you can actually see things or hear things from people who are, and you go, oh, I felt like that. That resonates with me when I was doing it. I quite like that because then you kind of think, oh, so we all have a similar feeling when we're doing this, irrespective of what level I guess that we're at.
Mm-hmm. Oh, no, I agree, and I think we do forget when we look to celebrities for inspiration, or they're just on in the background, or we're reading about them, or whatever. I think it's really easy to forget that they're just human beings and they have hopes and dreams as well. And even the most confident people, well, people that appear the most confident anyway, have insecurities, and none of us want to put something out there for public consumption and then be ridiculed or be criticized negatively or whatever, because it's a lot of people haven't got the skin for it. And I suppose even in his position, being incredibly well known, if it's the first thing you've ever done of a thing, then you're going to have some nerves about it. I mean, that obviously some people are just built to be confident anyway. I'm certainly not, but it also shows that you care about something. And if you're nervous or you're like, oh, I really hope people like it, it just means that you care about it, and that's going to come out in your work. So I think even writing something and finishing it, even if you don't publish it, is a huge achievement. And the fact that you've gone beyond that and have this tangible copy with a proper cover that you can tell people about and then give to or sell to is phenomenal. There are so many people that don't even get to that point. So I hope that you are really proud of what you've done, because you bloody should be.
No, thank you. And that it is an interesting reflection on that, whether you hear other people talking about that. But I've also been going to some sort of writer retreat events as well.
Oh, cool.
And one of the things I went when I was early in the first book before COVID, and I've sort of been going back working on a second book, which again we can touch on. But the interesting thing there is when you get to sit and talk to people who are at different stages as well. So there are then sometimes people there who may have written 4 books, they're doing different things, or there are people still on the first book, and it's nice then to be able to talk to people and say, yeah, keep going. You can get there, you will get there. So you do feel that sometimes, that sense of achievement where you say, yep, I have done a book, I'm now trying to work on a second one, and people go, really? Yeah. And you have that kind of reflection afterwards of, yeah, not everybody finishes. I've met a number of people who have said they started and never finished, and I think Graham in his interview earlier said, that's the difference. Something that's just on a laptop or it's in a cupboard or whatever, the difference of finishing it and getting it out there, irrespective of what happens afterwards, is something to reflect on as an achievement. So I think I definitely feel that. And I remember listening to interviews when I was working on it, thinking, oh, I hope to get that point one day where I've finished it and I've done it, and I could talk about it the way that person was talking about it. And now that's happening, and that's then you kind of reflect on all the work that's gone in. And it did take me a long time to write it, and there's been a lot, obviously editing and all the rest of it, and redrafting, and you put so much into it, and then it does feel like something you reflect back on as an achievement. Then I think.
Would you say that was the best thing about writing this book, is finishing it, or is there something you learned about yourself along the way?
That's a great question. I think the finishing it is an important thing, because if you look back, sometimes you think, oh, the amount of things you've done. I mean, did you see things always through, or should you have seen something through that you didn't? Past times, different things, and that commitment to seeing something through to the end. I do look back on that now, whether that's an age thing as well, that you're getting a bit older, you feel like you could do that more than you'd have done at a younger age. I don't know. I'm not sure it's something I'd have seen through 15, 20 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
So I think there's an element of that persistence. I remember getting to probably halfway through, and in my head, I think I even might have said to my wife, I must finish this. I can't have got this far of doing, I think it was at the time, maybe about 40,000 words or something. I can't do this and then just leave it. It became that labour of love thing. I must finish this. I must find a way,
Mm.
And just the persistence and seeing that through probably then gave me a thought reflection around the importance of that dedication in things. And if you can see things through, you can really, with that effort, look what you can achieve. It is so easy to give up on things, but to actually see things through the harder path but it's the reward at the end
Mm.
of that, of finishing something like that, is these definitely, take a lot from that.
Oh, for sure. And that's something I learned with. So I went to like catering college immediately as soon as I could leave school. I left school because I thought, oh, this isn't for me. I'm moderately intelligent, but not. I don't love sitting down learning things. I'm a very hands-on person. And then later in life, I did a psychology degree, and I finished it. I think around the time that I turned 30. And that in itself, I started it, and in the midway point, I fell into this like hole of this feels like it's never going to end. And why am I doing this now? And what's the point? And then the moment that I achieved it and I submitted that last piece of work, I sobbed because I am the queen of half doing stuff and not finishing it. And to have that achievement and showing myself the first time that I've ever achieved this like really huge thing that I've committed a lot of time to, that really encouraged me to, that was the jumping off point for me going, I really need to start writing this book because I know that I can finish stuff now. And I'd never done that before, and I'd never really like stuck to something for a long period of time without getting bored halfway through, because I get very easily distracted, and if it's not giving me instant dopamine when I'm doing it, I'm like, this is boring now, I don't like it. And it's the same for writing anything. Like when I get stuck in that hole because my book's not finished, and I'm sure I'm going to keep saying that for 10 years, but eventually it'll come out, is that I found that writing a short story, or, just something small so that I can start it and finish it, I think that's a really, really good tool. So I think creatively, if you ever get stuck on anything, sometimes you just need to have something like a small win so that you can go, okay, I can actually finish something. Um, you said that you wrote a majority of this, or you worked on a majority of this during lockdown in England, which was harsh, really rough. I was also in England at the time of COVID years. Did you find that it was a good escape for you?
I think so. I've heard so many stories of people who have either done positive or negative elements
Mm.
of that time. For me, it felt like that was then the right time. I'd started this
Mm.
not all that long before, a few months before the very first sort of lockdown.
Mm.
I'd been to one of the writers' retreats. I think it was probably 3-4 weeks before the first lockdown, um,
Wow.
which was the first one I'd been to.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I only had a few thousand words
Mm-hmm.
at all. Went that day, obviously did a bit more, you get to sort of engage with other people. But then the whole lockdown happened, and it felt like,
Mm-hmm.
well, this is a perfect opportunity to carry that on
Mm-hmm.
and to do something with that time constructively. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's what, and I've over the time I've heard of different people who've done different things. They did businesses. Other people, you know, suffered terribly, not just with COVID, but in terms of their own physical and mental health and
Mm-hmm.
different things. So I think it was a positive thing to go, oh, actually, I'm going to do this on Sunday when we can't go anywhere. So
Mm.
if we would have been going to something or going somewhere or to see people, and we can't do that, if I'm going to sit down and say, actually, at 12 o'clock on Sunday, I'm going to sit at the front table, the laptop's going on, and I'm going to try and do 3 hours,
Mm-hmm.
for argument's sake,
Mm-hmm.
and do that. And I remember sometimes I'd say to my wife, oh, I did this many words today, or I did this, and she'd sort of be going, oh yeah, a little bit of kind of, as in, yeah, I cleaned the bathroom, the kitchen, cooking the dinner, and you've done what? A few hundred words about scientists? What, what's this? So you kind of, but it became that sort of challenge. Then
Mm-hmm.
was even that I'd be thinking, oh, how many words I'm going to do today, or just keep developing the story and different
Mm-hmm.
things. And it was, I mean, at times the whole, they talk about writer's block and all those sort of things, but where you get to a point where, what am I? And because I hadn't plotted it out, and I don't know whether there's a right way or a wrong way. I've heard authors who plot everything out to the nth degree in advance, do all the research, everything,
Mm-hmm.
versus the people like me who kind of go, right, we'll start with that. Let's have a few ideas to go from there for the next chapters, and then we'll do research into that.
Mm-hmm.
Or actually, now I need to think about that, and went in that way at it. So I didn't have the plan as such of
Mm.
this is how it will finish, even because a lot of people said to me, "So you didn't know how it would finish when it started?" No, I hadn't come up with the ending at all. I hadn't even come up with there were characters I was inventing as I was going along, going, actually, this would be a good way to bring somebody else into this particular bit, and how can
Yeah.
we link them into the rest of the story? Because again, that's often how things would play out in life. You go, oh,
Mm-hmm.
do you know a plumber? Yeah, well, actually, my brother, blah blah blah. And his mate can do that, and it's a bit like that kind of thing where you connect into something of, well, I know them, and they know that.
Mm-hmm.
Then that world's a small place, kind of the connectivity thing. There was an element of that, I think, into my mindset, which some people think maybe there's too many characters. I don't know, but I'm not sure on your thoughts on that, whether there's too many or
Oh, I
enough.
liked it. But I find that I get very bored very quickly when I read. And I'm a speed reader as well. I've said this in other episodes, which is terrible, really. Which is why I always say my opinion about whether or not a book is good is not a gospel, and I'm not an expert. I really enjoyed it, and I liked that I had new things to learn, and I had new characters to meet. And it was in fairly quick succession, but it wasn't like bam, they're gone. It was like, okay, now there's another person. You're like, cool, okay, what are they doing? I find that very exciting and very engaging. And it also means that it kind of made me appreciate the planning that it took to make this work, because I was like, how are they going to fit in 2 chapters' time? Because they've just appeared out of nowhere. Oh, actually, that's a really integral part. Um, but yeah, I loved that, and I thought it was very fun. Um, one question that I wanted to ask was, did the idea for the book come first, or did you think, I want to write a book? What can I write it about?
So I'd thought about writing a book for a while
Mm-hmm.
without having perhaps an idea of what I would
Okay.
write. So it's
Mm-hmm.
something I'd thought about for a while. And then when I kind of thought about it more seriously, it's then what would I want to write? So I
Mm-hmm.
kind of wrote something that I'd like to read. And a lot of people have said to me, there's a lot of dialogue as well. It's quite voice led
Mm-hmm.
in parts, almost reads at times almost like a film and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So I suppose I kind of wanted to write something um, that I thought would be, fun, entertaining, all the rest of it. Then it's the idea. So I kind of got to the point of like, I think a thriller type thing would be
Yeah.
my kind of thing, keep it pacey, keep it fast, a little bit of humor interspersed.
Mm-hmm.
Action, again, I kind of like, the action films of time gone by as well. And as you said, there are some action sequences in there. So
Mm-hmm.
kind of that merging of things. But I had obviously just getting the idea. I don't know specifically why. I kind of it was mainly I think it's around the way technology has evolved is what was really playing in my mind, and where things are
Mm-hmm.
going with the AI debate and some of those kind of things sort of played in. So that's
Mm-hmm.
what I kind of thought about. Well, what about if you kind of looked at something like somebody creating the half human, half robot thing? Is a bit where we're almost going with the AI
Mm-hmm.
situation now. It's all becoming, very sort of Terminator 2 is becoming very real.
Yes.
So it was taking it back to that era. I thought was
Mm.
important. I didn't want to do it now. It wouldn't make the sense. It's almost like we've gone so much further on. But what about if you went back and somebody was ahead
Mm.
of their time at that point doing
Mm-hmm.
stuff that was where we're going to get to a little
Yeah.
bit. I think was where it took me. And the idea that was then that was that, well, let's have this guy doing that and then just go from there.
Mm.
And then it became like, well, how would this work? For example, in terms of the fact of if he dies, what's the situation with the kid? So
Mm.
having them at the age that they were at, they're sort of on that sort of periphery of young adults, sort of late teenagers, and all the rest of it. But
Yeah.
the mother obviously was not in it; had passed away when they were
Mm-hmm.
young children. So we obviously brought the aunt character in and stuff like that. So
Mm-hmm.
it was also then creating this environment where there's a lack of close people for them to rely on, I suppose, as well, which then leads into them mixing with all these different other people in,
Yeah.
law enforcement and different characters
Mm-hmm.
and different things and situations, and that they've got to navigate and
Mm.
who you can trust and all that. So it's then exploring just themes about normal life as well. Who can you trust? Who can't you trust?
Mm-hmm.
When are people telling the truth? When are they lying? And all these scenarios that sort of go on. And obviously I took it to the nth degree
You
in
did.
a lot of it. Let's be honest.
You
I
ran
really,
with it.
I really did go with it. Of like, to the point of. let's just anything's possible here. We can just run with it. And I think that was the joy of it as well. Is you do something that, yes, it's fictional. I
Mhm.
mean, obviously, I was keen on making it make sense,
Yeah.
but yeah, at the same time, it is an escape thing that you could read and not take hopefully too seriously. I mean, I know one of the people saying, you mentioned about the characters, that they were reading a particular part where it's almost like an offshoot thing that's happening,
Mhm.
and they were just saying, I was just, where is this going? As in, that was their reaction reading it, going, what is this? How is this going to connect into the story? And then when it all kind of comes back round, they were
Mhm.
like, they were like, really enjoyed that, and said, I'd actually wouldn't mind seeing a spin off of them, actually,
Oh,
in, for
fun.
example. So that's been one of the interesting things where people take from it, because it has been
Mhm.
written ultimately as a standalone, because I
Mm.
wasn't kind of that keen on doing the series of
Yeah.
things, because I mean there's a lot of that out there, and I thought,
Mhm.
I'd rather not do that. So yeah, doing the standalone, but then people have gone, well, you could prequel this, you could do the
You could
before,
actually.
you
Yeah.
could sequel this of what's
Mhm.
afterwards, you can offshoot with certain characters because they
Mhm.
feel like they've got their own situation in. So that's quite an interesting thing, to consider. Although for the second book I've been working on, that's not what I've done. But but what I've done it's a different story, more in the modern time.
Okay.
But somebody gave me an idea at one of the writer events,
Mhm.
and they said to me, "Have you considered linking it back to your first book?" And I hadn't. And then
Ah,
I
what,
went,
like in the same
"Ooh,
universe?
yeah." Basically, how
Interesting.
could you link the second book, even though it's a different story? Would you be able to link it back to the first one? And I had a thought about that, and I went, actually, maybe I could. And
Mm.
then that's now become an interesting component on the second one. Is, okay, we'll do certain things that are happening in that's now a lot later than the first one, but you can, certain things will link back. And also
Mhm.
having those bits in it where if you've read the first one, something you'd go, it'd be subtle, but you'd go, oh, okay. But it's
Mhm.
not pertinent to if you hadn't read the first one, you just get more out of it. So it's become a little bit like that as well, of doing standalone things that, you could read in their own right. Because
Mhm.
I think, you might have mentioned this before, but if you write something where it's just a complete cliffhanger and there's going to be a sequel, but
Mhm.
when are you ever going to do the sequel? People get annoyed with
Yeah.
you of like,
Mhm.
are we going to see this in 4 years' time? What, what's that? So if you do something where people go, there might be a sequel, but there doesn't have to be a sequel,
Yeah.
or that's not so bad then, because people at least feel like there's a satisfaction if it's finished, rather than,
Yeah.
oh, you've left that completely now,
Mhm.
where are we going with that? Um,
Yeah, I know, I agree with you, and I think especially if you haven't already got the second book plotted out and you've started it already, I think it's kind of cruel to leave people on a cliffhanger, or unless you have like real intentions to actually give people the next thing, because you've done a really good job of making it so that it's a comfortable ending where you're like, okay, everything's tied up in a nice, neat little bow. We know what's happened with everybody. This is the end of the book now. But you also, again, leave yourself open to a sequel, a prequel, spin offs, and things like that, where you're not like, everyone's dead now. And nobody is ever going to be alive again, and history has been deleted, so you can't do anything with it. So, yeah, I think I'd be interested to see um, if you ever like branch off from that. So you said you're working on another book and you had this idea of linking it back to the Doctor's Impatience. Are you able to tell me a little bit about what this one is? I'm conscious that you've not finished it and I don't want to put pressure on you, but if anything you want to share, I'd be interested in hearing.
yeah, I mean, I've kind of gone with the next one a little bit more, into the current time.
Okay.
Uh, Mainly it, this might be laziness, in terms of the amount of research for the first one when you're having to go back and
Yeah.
do so much research. You go, if you go in the current time, then the research element might be a little bit easier.
Yeah, look at the movies.
um, yeah. So I decided to kind of go with, it's a completely different story and
Okay.
set of characters. I suppose it's maybe a little bit dystopian in some respects. Um, Whether I'm developing a bit of a theme here, so the corruption theme may come through, again,
Okay.
a little bit here, in and of course we're not living in a world with any political corruption whatsoever. So
None at all. Not even
so
a
it
little
is
bit.
not even a little. So it's absolutely the purest of fiction. um, um, but in terms of, I had this idea about, essentially people being taken to an island,
Hmm.
not of their own free will.
Okay.
Um, and it was basically then a take on what sort of is done with those people, um, and in terms of the sort of this grander plan, shall we say, that they
Mm-hmm.
have for them,
Hmm.
and how and why they were particularly sort of had been taken there and whatnot. So it's a completely different concept
Mm.
to the Doctor's Hidden Patients, but again, it's similar in the sense of I'm writing it obviously as a thriller.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably similar in terms of I'm trying to keep it fairly fast paced, maybe not quite as fast paced as the first one,
Mm-hmm.
um, because some people have said could try and slow it down a little bit in parts and make and still there's quite a lot of sort of voice led elements to it and dialogue elements to it. But I'm
Mm-hmm.
exploring that. I'm about 30,000 words into that at the moment.
Awesome.
But what I've noticed I have done again a little bit, because again, I haven't plotted it out. I haven't got the ending yet or anything like that. I have started to do the thing with the characters again,
Oh,
inadvertently.
how
And it
funny.
must be a style of my writing. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But I started going down the route with, right, so I picked specific characters that were kind of being taken to the island.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was the bit about, well, what happens with people then back at home? What happened to
Mm-hmm.
them? Right? Kind of thing, where it becomes this sort of almost trying to find out what had happened.
Mm.
So you're kind of then bringing in characters who then become the people trying to figure out what's going on.
Oh,
That on
interesting.
paper become look very minor, and then
Mm-hmm.
suddenly they're becoming more prominent. And then I've managed to join two characters together that don't naturally fit together at all.
Mm.
It's really quite entertaining. So we've got this woman who's it's like an older woman actually, kind of she's about 60,
Mm-hmm.
and then she's befriended this shopkeeper,
Mm-hmm.
and they've joined forces. And one of the things, again, without going into too much detail because it is quite early on this, but
Mm-hmm.
they're looking at the CCTV from his shop that sees something happen that's
Interesting.
pertinent to the people
Mm-hmm.
being some of the people that were taken away.
Mm-hmm.
And then they meet this other character who had witnessed it, but nobody believes them
Mm-hmm.
because this person, is like was living on the streets and
Mm-hmm.
saw it, but nobody, what's been, but they believe, and then they see this CCTV that backs it up, and then it becomes this sort of spinning, connecting the dots together
Mm-hmm.
of meeting then other people who are talking about some of the other people who have gone missing from another part of. So I've used different parts of the UK as well.
Mm.
So you've got people who've gone missing from one part, then another part, then another part, and stuff like that. And then linking these people in different parts, going, well, what happened to where have they gone? And bringing all of that together. Um,
Funny.
that's the sort of process I've been kind of going through. But the same thing as the Doctor's Hidden Patients.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly, supporting characters become more pivotal, and you're trying
Mm.
to go, well, what's that all about? Why? Where have they come from? What are they doing? And then it kind of you want to build that in. They go, and you go, oh, all right, okay, I can see that. And I think maybe that's just in terms of whether it's my style of doing it, and that's what I
Quite
enjoy
possibly.
that bit of the maybe more around some of the plotting,
Mm-hmm.
within it when you're going right. Okay, so what will we do there? And then even just bringing like little different elements into these people's characters. I mean, there's a scene that in it that's totally it's not massively relevant, but it's just in normal life. So they're having the chat about the shopkeeper
Mm-hmm.
um, had basically had put on too much weight from eating biscuits from his own shop, and then, and then suddenly the woman's there and they're looking at the CCTV having a cup of tea or whatever, and she sort of says, "Have you got any biscuits?" And he just has a complete meltdown of like these biscuits, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And it's just minor things, but it brings them together as characters, and then they become this sort of dynamic duo of these almost, these people, these most unregulated people whatsoever. And I've
Mm.
sort of been taking that on further and further, and then their relationship with other people and going through it has become part of it. So you've almost got these
Mm.
again, like the Doctors and Patients, like side stories running, and then you're trying to then bringing it all back and linking it all
Mm-hmm.
back together I think is just the challenge that I enjoy. Yeah, I mean, I accept it wouldn't be for everybody, but yeah,
It's
obviously,
for
I really
me.
appreciate what you and obviously many other people have
Mm-hmm.
said. Well, not that many, but
I'm gonna buy it. I'm already interested. I'm like, my ears pricked up as soon as you said that they were going to be kidnapped and put on an island. I was like, I want that book. So when am I going to get to read it?
No, I suppose that's the challenge. So I say I'm about 30,000 words
Yeah.
into that one. The Doctor's Hidden Patients, I think, finished at about 84.
Yeah.
So I have got a fair bit to do.
Mhm.
And yeah, so obviously we're doing the podcast, with
Mhm.
Rage and Rich as well. So it is just obviously sometimes fitting these things in, but I'm planning
Yeah,
to
of
just keep
course.
working away at it. I would love to be sat here in, I don't know, 12 months time saying here's a copy of it, but I don't know if that's too ambitious, or maybe that is the point. I need to,
Mm.
this is outside of the COVID times when I had maybe more time, is that discipline then to carrying that on. um by the time obviously this episode goes out, where will I have got to? I suppose that might be a target actually, of
Mm.
how far forward I can get it in that time would be good.
Yeah.
But it's that
Yeah.
other challenge about doing it again as well. So people often talk about what's it called? Oh, can't think of it now. Oh, imposter syndrome. The
Oh,
imposter syndrome. I
yes.
couldn't think of
Yeah.
it for a
Yeah. Yeah.
minute.
That's
Um,
okay.
I was at a moment of blankness with that. But you go, oh, I wrote one book.
Mhm.
Somehow you've managed to do that. Bet you couldn't do another one. Do you know where you have that in your mind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
like? So now the second one has become, can I do this again? Why am I doing this again?
Mhm.
And then so the challenge is back on, and you learn from what you did the first time. You definitely obviously do learn bits, but it
Mhm.
doesn't make it easier as such. You've still got the same process to go through, and the bit around making things make sense and whatnot. But again, interjecting humor into it.
Mm.
So yeah, so there's a character in the Doctor's Hidden Patients who's not in it. They're mentioned,
Mm.
so I've brought them into the second book
Oh, that's cool.
in a way that they weren't in the first. They were mentioned in the first one, and bear in mind that would be like 25 years ago. So
Mhm.
now I've brought them into the second book in a roundabout way. And that was interesting, just exploring that, because you're then taking them forward from how they were referenced in the first one as somebody at that point in time that's now gone and had this successful career. And now they're here, but they were never really pivotal to the first one. But if you'd read the first book, you go, oh, yeah, I remember that maybe mentioned that person being mentioned. And now here they are in that. So that was again, that's fun trying to do those little connection bits,
Mm.
those things that take you back to the first one.
Little Easter eggs. Yeah.
So that's what somebody said to me at
Mhm.
one of the writers' events was that as well, was you want to do it in that kind of way.
Mm.
And it's like, yeah, actually, I quite like that idea. It's almost becomes, I suppose, a universe of its own without being a specific series.
Mhm.
And you could read, like I said earlier, you can read it as a standalone. But if you've read one and then you're reading something else, you might go, oh, I link it back. I link it back. Um, so yeah,
That's
it's
cool.
quite an interesting challenge.
Yeah, I bet. And that's the kind of beauty about writing fiction, is that you are creating your little worlds, and or massive worlds depending on, how in depth you go into them. And it's totally up to you how it goes. And that's quite a powerful and exciting thing, is that you're like, I want to make them fly, and then so you just write that they fly, and now they fly. And that's really, really fun. And you don't have to be realistic if you don't want to, obviously, depending on what genre you want to fit into. What has been the most challenging thing for you in terms of the process of either writing or like getting it to the point where people can actually hold it and read it?
Yeah, I think if you do it in stages, I suppose the writing is one thing,
Mm.
in terms of actually the seeing it through to the end. Then the whole editing, kind of redrafting and all those processes to get it the best it can be, versus then the getting it out there, as as we sort of know, is these really difficult, is massively competitive
Mm-hmm.
environment, and there are so many books out there. If you don't have huge amounts of resources to invest in what you're doing, or you have that backing of publishers and all that sort of
Mm-hmm.
stuff, it is definitely a real challenge, I suppose, is getting that book where people take a chance on you
Mm-hmm.
as somebody they don't know, as an author, or you're not a famous person writing books, because you obviously got that. I think I read recently, is it 50 Cent is now doing a thriller book with somebody.
Really?
Yeah, he's done it with I think somebody else. But yeah, so you go,
Cool.
oh, okay, so the competition gets fiercer in terms of, you've then got other celebrities who weren't even writers now,
Yeah.
coming in from other forms of entertainment industry and coming in.
Mm.
So, you've got me going, hey, have a read of The Doctor's Hidden Patients, but then you've
Mm.
got 50 Cent, who's got, a
Yeah.
massive platform. I suppose that's the difficulty, isn't it? How do you convince people to take a chance on um, somebody who's not written a book before? I think that's the one thing that comes out for me when you go, oh, debut. How do you go from, I suppose, being debut to you do more, or people really latch on to what you're doing, or they do or they don't? I suppose some people will enjoy it, some people won't, but
Yeah.
that's the same for anybody, isn't it? We don't all enjoy the same thing, so some people will enjoy it, some people won't. But how do you make sure you find those people and get that to that point? That's probably the most difficult challenge at this point, I think. When you're talking to people in life, you got that opportunity with somebody where you go, oh, I've written a book. Well, of course, not everybody says that. So people go, oh, what's that then? What's that about? Then you put a copy in their hand. I mean, I've almost become like a really bad salesperson. I'm like, have a look at this. Like people used to knock the door and try and sell stuff to. People are like,
Yeah.
have you look at this? That kind of thing. But when you have that connection sometimes with people, and people go, really? Well, when did you do this? And they ask you questions almost like getting an interview in real life. They latch onto that, but that's a lot harder to do in terms of your book being, I guess, out there online, or even to some degree, even if you have got books in the shops, which obviously I don't, but you're still getting somebody to buy it is still that harder, because they're not getting that bit, are they? They're not
Yeah.
getting that connection unless they kind of recognise it and go, oh, we mentioned Graham earlier, for example, Graham Norton, but
Yeah.
oh, we know him. He's
Mm-hmm.
broadcaster, blah blah blah, has been established. I'll buy that maybe because I
Mm-hmm.
recognise who that is. But if your name's just amongst there and you're not, what is that tipping point for somebody to go, yeah, I'd take a chance on that. Without them having that opportunity to speak to you about it sometimes, because you become your advocate really for what you've done. Or
Definitely.
you become my advocate for what I've done in this, but
I'm trying.
this is how this process, in terms of the work that you're doing, which is again fascinating, really, from the independent author's perspective, because you're creating something then that people don't have the platform. I can't just go and get interviewed on radio, television in the way that famous people or people with agents and publishers and all the rest of it can do. Um, it's an interesting one of how you bring that out. So if people listening, they listen to this conversation, gives them a much more insight into the book, the author, that process, than they would be able to get. Whereas you switch on the TV and see somebody going, oh, I've got my book coming out, blah 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 blah. People go, oh yeah, okay, that's interesting. But we can't, obviously we can't all have that platform, but we've all still done the process and the work to make something like that happen.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very common theme with all indie authors, which is basically the crux of why I started doing this in the first place, is that everybody has a platform, but it's oversaturated. Everybody's got a platform, but there's a paywall. There are hurdles that we shouldn't have to jump to get people to see the art that you've produced. And what I'm sort of keen to hammer home to people is that we don't gatekeep artwork. We don't ban books here. And everybody has produced their own version of art. Somebody might be able to produce, this is such a terrible example, but this is the best simplified version I can give, is that if you go through an art museum and you see a piece of, a portrait, and it's got one splash on it, and you think to yourself, I could have done that. But actually I couldn't have done, because everybody's story, everybody's book, everybody's piece of artwork is going to be completely different to the next person. And when we all succeed, that's when it works. But when we shit on each other or put each other down or don't support one another, is when the whole industry starts getting muddy and disgusting, and then people don't want to get involved. But if they see this group of independent writers getting together and supporting each other and being kind and being like, this is my story, this is how I got to this point, or writing this book got me through a pandemic, or I went through this really rough time in my life, but I achieved this, and now now I'm better for it. It suddenly becomes this source of good stuff that we can go to and go, okay, I want to feel the good stuff too. So that's my hope, is that it doesn't matter if you're a celebrity. They're just people that a lot of people have seen on TV. It doesn't mean you know them any better. And quite frankly, they probably put on a front for the most part. But we're real people with real feelings, with real experiences, and we're willing to be vulnerable. And that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting one, and it's the thing around the independent author side of things is I don't feel negatively when I read about even independent authors who I've done this many sales or this day.
Mm-hmm.
You feel happy for people that actually they are making their success of something that you understand what they've been through to deliver that. And I think that you feel that affinity with it. And again, feel that affinity with it, whether they're somebody, again, at the higher selling end, famous or independent, you understand the process and the challenge that is. So I certainly don't look at it in that way. It's the only person I'm beating in the end is myself in terms of figures. I don't have a target of books, obviously I need to sell or anything like that in terms of I've got a contract or anything like that. Every time you sell a copy or whatever, that feels like an achievement. And I often see that with independent people is that's how it makes you feel. Every is somebody else's, is going to have a read of what you've done and all the work you've put in. That's great. And there is no need for it to become negative at that, in that way, because we're not all going to be, plastered all over Waterstones or Barnes and Noble or whatever. That's just but yeah, having that opportunity to get stuff out there, and if people enjoy what you're doing, I guess getting that feedback and stuff like that is really useful and motivating. I mean, of course, the whole thing around you say about we're real people and we put our feelings out there. I mean, of course, T.A. Shelano is not my real name. That's
I
that's
wanted
going
to
to
ask you about that.
So my real details. Oh, this sounds really suspicious now, doesn't it? It's like, there's now a raft of people at Interpol going, who's this? Who's in the real details?
I don't think Interpol are worried about this podcast.
You never know. But it's joking about it, but like the real details thing. So when I looked at obviously using variations of even my own real name and all the rest of it, already gone, already authors using my favorite one was there was somebody using my real details as their pseudonym.
I love that.
Which
Pseudonymception.
And you go, that's random. Like in terms of, I looked them up and you go, their real name is this, and then why have they picked that? Why have they picked my name? And you go, okay, fine, fair enough. And then you go and you look at variations, and there'd be somebody else doing something else that's whether it's fiction or even like non-fiction. There was somebody who was doing something which was much more academic even as well. So you got this variation, every variation. So you go, well, okay, that feels a bit weird, although it's my details. How do you then not get confused with them when you're talking about doing stuff? If what do you do? So that started the whole thing about trying to come up with a pseudonym. That is so much more difficult than I ever thought. But I'd heard of various authors doing it as well. I think even J.K. Rowling, I think famously, having obviously done Harry Potter books, then wrote books as, was it Robert Galbraith or something? I think actually wrote as if it was been written by a man, and nobody connected it back at the time to J.K. Rowling, for example. But people do this all the time, and I think I mentioned I met Miranda Dickinson, the author, and she'd I think wrote a lot of romance novels in her name, and then when she wanted to move into crime novels, they had to use a different name, and she now uses MJ White or something. So so it's not an unknown thing to have pseudonyms. It's maybe slightly unusual for somebody who's got no background whatsoever to try. It's a bit bold. But I thought, okay, well, seeing as all my details are gone, I'm going to find something
Mhm.
unique and whatnot. And obviously, it's now become what I do the podcast in as well. So it's become almost
Mhm.
like a form of a character. But
Alter ego.
it is a bit weird, isn't it? Yeah, I suppose it's a bit strange. But so it's how it started was to keep looking for different things, and everything seemed to have been taken or gone, or every combination of different things that you try. So I was thinking, what can we do? What can we do? And then it took me back to a conversation that so a girl I know, we were in a pub a few years ago,
Mhm.
and somebody had upset me, and I got a little bit upset, and not terribly bad for the benefit of this, but I was annoyed
Mhm.
by something somebody had said. And she said to me, and she knows that this is the inspiration for it as well. She said to me, she said, I looked at you. Now, some people think I look a little bit like James Gandolfini that played Tony Soprano, right? There's certain photos in there, there's a little bit of a look like
A
that.
little bit.
And my wife says I have very similar characteristics of how he eats stuff out the fridge and all sorts from the program, right? So So there
Okay.
became this thing about, she went, I looked at you when you were annoyed. She went, and I saw Tony Soprano. I went, okay. But of course, I'm from Birmingham, England, which
Mhm.
is famous program from here is the Peaky Blinders.
Mhm.
She said, but when I listened to you, I heard Tommy Shelby, obviously played by Kieran Murphy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. So that stuck with me when I was going through this. So I went, actually, why don't I do an amalgamation then
Mhm.
of that? So it became okay. So Tommy, Thomas, T. Okay.
Mhm.
Tony. Well, I don't want TT. So Anthony, TA. Okay. You,
Mhm.
you Shell from Shelby and the Arno from Soprano. So that's
Oh my god,
that's
that's
where it came from. So
amazing.
it is technically Thomas, Anthony, Shelby Soprano. It's where it says TA Shelano is where it came from, and it's all
Oh, that's
from
amazing.
that person saying that at that time. And then you put it out and you go, right, that's got to be unique.
Mhm.
No one's. This is it sorted. There's no way this will. That's it. It's unique. I don't. No matter what happens, that's fine. This is not going to be confused with anybody else or anything else. You think. And
Mhm.
then suddenly I find that actually there's Shelano Lab or Labs, I think is a massive company, beauty company, cosmetics in Australia,
Excellent.
which is just brilliant link. But what I like about it now is because obviously we've put the image of the book and everything's online, and you
Mhm.
can literally go into Google and search, like the Shelano or even the Dr. Sim page and all the rest of it, and suddenly you find there's like pictures and pictures and pictures of moisturizer and all this sort of stuff with Shelano Lab. And then in amongst it all is the picture of the doctor's hidden patients. I mean, they're going to love me.
Amazing.
It's I don't know whether or not this is the marketing deal that we need. You get a free copy of the Doctor's Hidden Patients with every $50 of
I
moisturizer
think
and so
it's a great idea.
it's just
Do it.
but again, whenever you think you've done something that's unusual, you still something else comes back. It's so difficult,
It is so hard.
but once you're with it, you're stuck with it. Then I think you kind of go, well,
Mhm.
actually, and I think from the author thing as well was a little bit of like sometimes authors do have the first initial, the second initial,
Mhm.
and then a surname thing. So it was like, yeah, actually, okay, that works. But then you
It
realise
checks
I
out.
am stuck with this now.
Yeah,
So
committed now. You can't change it.
so every podcast that we do now,
Mhm.
where you start to go, and Rich goes, and I'm Raging Rich, and I go, and I'm T.A. Shelano, and you go, this is really really strange. Where there's now this sort of almost this sort of bizarre characteristic of I wrote it as the author, but now the author
Mhm.
is now T.A. Shelano, which was never a thing. But now that's my author name. Now that's my podcast name. Now, this that's a kind of an interesting dynamic that I never saw coming with this. I'm almost
Mhm.
glad now to some degree that I'm not now just using my own details and getting confused with everybody else who's using variations of my details.
Mhm.
I've got something separate. The beauty company in Australia might feel differently. I'll get a letter at some point. Can you change this?
I feel a collaboration coming.
Do you think?
Yep, that's my feeling about it. Maybe you could like say, "Oh, I'll mention your products in book 2 if you cut me some sort of deal."
That would be
See if they bite.
something. It's different, but again, it sets it out, I suppose, a little bit from um, yeah, from everything else to some degree.
Definitely.
But no, and that's the way that, again, the whole journey is played out. I guess it's just, it is such a strange old process that you go through. I didn't know anything about writing books. Didn't really know a huge amount about the industry in great detail, and have learned so much through this process, and different things that you wouldn't have done, and learned so much about things that that you didn't know about. And that's, again, as part of a personal development point of view, that's a great thing to do, isn't it, in terms of that, seeing stuff through that we were talking about, or hobbies, pastimes, and to be able to see an end product of that, and to have felt you've learned something, you've got something out of it, it's definitely a great feeling, I think.
Yeah, very rewarding, most definitely.
But the one thing, I suppose, on the book is just, do we say that it is just a roller coaster ride, isn't it? I think
Oh, definitely.
I think that's what I would want to get across, is in terms of his, it's an
Hmm.
absolute, you know, literal sort of the roller coaster ride of all over the place, of
Constant
this is happening
whiplash.
and different things, and whoa, what's happened there, and
Yeah.
so if that is something that people enjoy, I think
Mm.
that's what I take from it. That certainly hope, for the most part. I'm not going to sit here and claim that it's the greatest literary work of all time, or anything like that, or anything ridiculous, because I'm sure there are purists who would look at it and go, what's all this dialogue he's doing here, and what's he done with that?
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting, but what really? But yeah, from a point of view, I think if you just wanted to literally sit and read something, and
Mm.
maybe you find humor in it, maybe you find something in it, and just, yeah, fun story that connects loads of stuff
Mm.
together, then that's what it is, effectively. Um,
Absolutely. I think that's a great summary, because it's, I mean, it's either you're either going to love it because it's a roller coaster, or love it because you resonate with the fact that your dad was a mad scientist and created robot human hybrids and left them in a warehouse for you to deal with later.
or
Those
any
two
other
types of readers.
or any other parent-child trauma, that could come out in it.
So much trauma.
Even if it wasn't just the half human robot, half human hybrids, just any kind of family traumas and situations, and whatnot. I suppose there's an element of that, and sibling rivalry, and all that sort of stuff,
Mm.
that comes through. But yeah, it was certainly a fun thing to do, and yeah, I'm pleased, obviously, with how it finished at the end, and I don't think I think I'm ready. It was ready when it
Hmm.
kind of got to the point of release. Now it's been through that process. You obviously get people go, "Oh, you could have done this, or you could have done that," but you're always going to get that. I'd like to have
Yeah.
seen more of this. My favourite one I get at the moment is people going, "I didn't like the fact you killed them off." I've had that for some of the characters as
Tough
well.
tits.
Well,
It
I know,
happens.
you know,
People that you like die in real life. It's just
yeah,
it just happens, doesn't it?
you get that kind of feedback as well. Or I wish you'd killed them
Yeah.
instead, something like that. You get that. But yeah, no, I think I just enjoy the challenge. Like you say,
Mm.
that building and creating something, and to me, it's trying to find something that it comes across, even like the conversations are authentic with people and characters and people
Mhm.
that you would meet or could meet, and linking those things together is it's just part of the challenge, part of the fun.
Yeah, definitely part of the challenge. But the fun in it is, actually completing it and going through that full journey and getting to walk about the universe that you've created and share it
Yeah.
with other people.
If you told me 5 years ago you'll have completed this book and you'll be sat here talking to you about it with, although obviously you're fellow Brit, but you're in America, talking
Mm.
about the book, I don't think I'd have believed that. So
Aw.
you just don't know, that just doesn't you just don't know what is going to happen, which again is a bit of a theme of the book. You
Mhm.
never know what's going to happen in life. Sometimes things happen that you don't expect, and it takes you off in another direction. And I think that's interesting that it's also done that to some degree. Then with me sat
Mm.
here talking to you about it, is that art imitating life, or life imitating art, or whatever they call it? But I guess that's the kind of the premise of that, really. So that's interesting.
Resonates most definitely.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, or either that, or the listeners this will be going, "What's he going on about?"
You'll have to read the book then, won't you, listeners?
Yeah.
So before we say our goodbyes for the last time today, can you tell our listeners where to find you and how they can find the Doctor's Hidden Patients?
So I do have my own website, which is shelanobooks.co.uk. You can purchase certainly ebooks on there in different formats. The paperbacks on there, I still have some left, but not huge amounts now. But they're UK only. But beyond that, yeah, you can find me on various other sites, including obviously Amazon and a number of others. If you have a look with the Doctor's Hidden Patients, it is readily available online. Yeah, shelanobooks.co.uk obviously is the site if you want to come and have a read. Obviously, of the first 3 chapters are in the blog there. If you want to have a look, see if it would be your sort of thing, or not. Again, I thought that's an option. You have a look and go, not for me, or more of that. Then that option is there. And yeah, obviously carrying on with obviously the podcast and whatnot. You find me on social media, TA Shelano. I'm on Twitter, the new one, Blue Sky.
Blue Sky. Yep.
Blue Sky. Instagram, Threads. Yeah, kind of. Yeah, all those kind of platforms. So yeah, if everyone wants to get in touch via the website, there's a contact as well. If you had any genuine questions, about the book or things like that, I'm open to that. Just please don't try and sell me more marketing services. There's it's the ones where it's the world famous author selling. They're famous. They're taking the time to sell marketing services. So
to you specifically, yes.
Yeah.
It makes you feel special.
Yeah. My favourites as well is where they go, "Your book is amazing." They've never read it, stuff
or it's
like
not out yet, or yeah.
So yeah, but no. Otherwise, genuinely, if people obviously got an interest, please let us know. And if you would be so kind as to want to have a look, have a look. If you read it and like it, great to have some more reviews. If you read it and you don't like it, well, that's the way. Still that's part of the process, and I accept feedback. But yeah, I think I'm pleased with it. And if you think it should make a film, please lobby all good studios. People think it would make a good film. And if you buy more copies of it, it's more chance of it becoming a film. I believe is the thing.
How many signatures do we need to get before it's read in Parliament? Is it 10,000? Just try and start with that one.
I'm not sure, without giving away anything in the book, the way I've treated political establishment won't be supporting me in having a film made. Can I go for government funding? No. Lottery funding? No.
If you take out this bit of the book.
Take out all of this bit's here. Just take that out. It's not nice.
Anyway, before I say anything that's going to get me a summons. So by the time this episode goes out, Indiosyncrasy.com will be live, and you'll be able to find T.A. Shelano's author feature alongside the links to the website and to buy the book and to get all of your social media as well. So I'll put the links in the description of the episode, but I just want to say a massive thank you for today, and I appreciate you taking a chance on a stranger, and thank you for writing your book.
No, thank you very much for having me, and obviously the one we've also done, obviously with Raging Rich as well. But it's been great getting an opportunity, to connect with you and be part and involved in what you're doing, which is fantastic. And I think that's the thing that we all have to think about when we're doing, their creative endeavors, whether it's books or it's podcasts or whatever we're doing, is is to enjoy it. I think that's a massive part of it. Do something you enjoy, do something positive, and then supports other people. Then you can make what can be at times a dark world a better place.
Amen to that. Wonderful time to sign off. So yeah, thank you so much, and I hope to have you again on the podcast to talk about book 2, because I'm very excited about reading it.
It's putting me under pressure to go and get cracking and move that 30,000 words bit forward a
Yep.
bit quicker.
Come on, chop chop. Okay, well, thank you so much, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you very much. All the best.